Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Steve Sabludowsky, publisher by ebuzz.com. And on this June 2nd morning, we have Bernie Pinsonat, Southern Media and Opinion Research, who just has come out with a poll, really interesting Louisiana-based poll. Good morning, Bernie, and how are you doing this June morning?
Hey, I'm doing great, Stephen. The legislature is in session. We're all still safe from them, but unfortunately we have a special session to go through, or us in Baton Rouge who are involved in politics like to talk about the session and what's happening. So it's a great time in Baton Rouge. Actually, Baton Rouge is a great place to be because we have the Capitol and a lot of people are in town during the session.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of parties and
money
really?
And parties and lobbyists and businessmen.
Really?
So Baton Rouge is a great place to be when we're having a session, especially if you're in politics. Are you interested in government, which Louisiana normally is, especially when it comes to the topic right now, which is most of the discussion, as you know, is based on the budget and money.
Okay, so the poll itself dealt with the budget, dealt with the governor, newly elected governor, John Bel Edwards, a issue of taxes, the issue of the Senate race, U.S. Senate race that's coming up, and then the presidential race. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, except the poll was commissioned by businessman, Republican businessman Lane Grigsby. It wasn't one of my polls that I go do with a bunch of contributors. This was something that Lane Grigsby occasionally does. We've done it for him before. He's done it with other people to take a look at what's happening with people's opinions on politics or taxes or budget or United States Senate race or the presidential. So he does these occasionally, and so this poll was commissioned by Lane Grigsby, and we did it for him.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that information. So let's first talk about the information that came out earlier this week, and that was really focusing upon the budget and taxes.
Yeah, that's dominated Louisiana all during the governor's race, Steve. It was about the budget mess that most candidates were willing to put the blame on Jindal. In subsequent, to begin at the end of the year, we had this huge deficit. The size of it and scope of it is anybody's guess, but we're trying to raise money to fix whatever it ends up being. So that has dominated Louisiana politics. It dominated the governor's race, and it's now dominating it spilled over into the United States Senate race, which is a subject I'm sure you and I'll get to in a minute. But it's about we've had a special session. We raised a lot of money. Now we're in a regular session. Now we're going into a special session. So yeah, this poll does look at those issues. It looks at it and since this is Grigsby, it looks at it a lot from Republicans and how voters back home view their Republican legislators, and are they likely to get reelected or they're unlikely to get reelected. You can't say right now because it does show that Republicans are more irritated than probably other voters because they're so anti-tax, anti-spending, but it does show that, and it reflects, I think, Stephen, we've seen Hilario and others say that there's no appetite right now for additional taxes, and we're having a special session to see if that can be accomplished. And I think we're trying to use we're trying to use a carrot and stick, which is now tops, but we didn't look at that in particular, but we did look at the special session. We did look at how the governor is doing versus the special session and up till now. Remember, we had done a poll in February, and one of the things I think you're leading me to is Yeah, it affected his popularity, good and bad. But, you know.
Okay, let's pause there for a second. Let me just give some background information. And that is that Louisiana right now, according to, I guess, just for everybody, is $600 million in a hole. And we just had a special session that preceded the current legislative session. The special session began, I think, in March, and that session lasted about 3 weeks. During that session, because we were in a roughly $1.9 billion hole at that time, for the upcoming for the upcoming year,
I think we raised $1.2 billion.
we raised $1.2 billion. In addition to that,
then they dropped it to $600 million.
Yeah, and that the money that we raised, which were just sales taxes primarily, and the year before, April last year through June, which was the legislative session, we raised roughly $750 million on the pretty much on the backs of the business community, although many people feel that the business community were really were able to get real benefits through the general administration and the legislature, and so they were the easier target to raise taxes on. And the reason why we're in this mess, I mean, we can debate this, but part of it, I think, is due to the oil price issue, the dropping of oil prices from over $100 a barrel to getting down to low 30s. Yeah. And then a lot of people, especially myself, but I think a lot of other people blame it, as you mentioned, blaming on the mismanagement of the general administration and the legislature during this time, allowing a lot of tax exemptions, a lot of they changed the income structure in terms of stelly, so there wasn't enough revenues coming in, or there was overspending, but we just didn't have, regardless, we didn't have enough revenues. So the combination of all that, that's why we were in the situation that we were in going into last spring, coupled by the fact we were taking money out of all these different government, say, funds that were available. So there wasn't anything left.
Yeah, we were taking money from DNR and the environmental, all of those fees that the people paid to have proper inspections of facilities, hunting license money. It was all just being moved around, and I think that was certainly one of the things that affected General. To me, the big thing that affected General, besides all of that, I don't know if the average person was that familiar with. I think General really got in trouble because he was really highly thought of as the guy who was going to fix all of the problems. And then as time went on, he had to defend himself with, I have the job I want, and sure. Nobody believed him.
Nobody believed him, sure.
And as the last 2 or 3 years of his term went on, it became more and more apparent that he wasn't here. He wasn't even in Louisiana. You can say that, well, I can always run the state with from a helicopter wherever I am, but that's just not good enough for the average person. And I think they felt he deserted Louisiana. That's the real rub with
yeah,
it.
Sure.
It was personal disappointment, which to me, if you're an elected official, it's okay to have disagreements even with the public on spending or priorities or the budget or various issues. But when you let the voters down and it's of a personal nature, I think that's why General is, popularity became so low that we saw 30%, which
Sure.
is amazing considering how popular he was.
Yeah, it is. So moving forward, then, basically we had a situation with the last September. I'm sorry, October, November. We had a governor's race. John Bel Edwards enters. He sees a budget that is way beyond his expectations. Expectations of all the candidates is based upon my own research of this and people that I've talked to. And so, bam, we got to raise taxes or we got to make these incredible cuts. So we talked about, the cuts that, in terms of business from last year, sales taxes, in terms of business, the taxes from last year, sales taxes from, say, the March session. This session, we cannot raise any taxes. So the focus right now is on cuts.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, and the budget. They're trying to pass a budget that will actually be a temporary budget until they have a special session to try to raise. Well, let me correct you on something. Larry was the first one to come out and say it yesterday. It's not 600 million anymore. It's 450 million. So we don't have a $600 million deficit. At first, we thought we had a $2 billion deficit. Then that went to 700 million. Then it went to 600 million. And now it's down to $450 million. And Steve, you just got to start laughing right now about what is the real deficit. And if you want to look at why the public doesn't quite believe what politicians say in Louisiana, and do they believe we really have $450 million deficit now, where it's falling by the day. And so, but we're looking at a special session to try to raise whatever the final number is. We really don't know what that number is. Sure. There are people out there right now who think we'll have an embarrassment of riches by the middle of next year, because the economy is coming back. Price of oil is bumping 50 and may get higher. So anybody who believes Louisiana is going to be broke next year, you're missing the economic indicators, and you'll see that 450 reduced even more in the next few months.
Well, yeah, and however, let me just say this: that over the last 8 years, we've had budgets, and we've had to basically, we've had to refund ourselves. The budgets weren't enough. The money that we allocated weren't enough. So, we've had 8 years of that, and so now the question is, what is the magic number? And we have to project what the economy that all might do, and everything else. So what happened to the $150 million? I did not read that. So
Alario announced it yesterday that the next year's deficit is now down to $450 million. And on the front page today, I think the story was Edwards is trying to use tops to leverage to get the $450 million he needs in the special session. And I don't really, I'm not up there every day following this, but I don't really believe, I'm not so sure legislators believe any numbers coming from anywhere is right now, because the deficit keeps dropping. I mean, it's dropping by the week, I guess you'd say. So it's really a bad backdrop to try to have a special session and say we need. Last week it was 600 million. Now yesterday, Alario announced it's only 450 million. So that's kind of the backdrop of where we are. However you want to take that, or however you want to look at it, is up to the individual voter as a pollster. All I know is that I continue to see Louisiana is very skeptical of how the money's spent, where the revenue goes, and the credibility caused by Jindal and whoever else, governor after governor, is low at best. We're actually, of the 50 states, we're 49th in lack of trust of the state government.
Yeah, and so That presents a real issue at this point in time. Let me throw some in terms of the lack of credibility, the fact that the oil prices are going up, and as a result of that, there's a direct relationship between increased oil and say decrease in terms of increased oil prices and decrease of the budget gap. Number. So at this point in time, given our economy, so now the governor has actually come out with his last week. He issued his call for the special session, and now okay. So that was last week. This week, however, you have your poll, and your poll indicates that number one, Republicans and Democrats do not raise taxes. That's
well, they're hesitant. They're not that receptive to the idea, and the poll actually is. You can say it's still accurate, but we use 600 million, and now it's a week later. It's all the deficit is really 400 million. So that would even be less taxes they'd have to raise on the individual taxpayer. So if you're telling them, if we're going to raise 100 million in taxes, or you're raising $1 billion, that's a big number. So it affects the polling data. But that's why it's so difficult. I looked at the poll that was done 4 hours in February. The poll numbers we used on the governor's budget and the poll numbers another firm used were really different, because the budgets are a moving target in Louisiana. It's just almost on a daily basis. What is the real cash flow shortage, or what is the anticipation of new revenue? And that's what the governor is dealing with, and that's what the legislature, and that's what the leadership. And of course, let's look at it from the government stance. It's tough on education leaders. It's tough on hospitals. It's tough on the people who are relying on those dollars, which a lot of it has been lost, and they haven't been funded adequately for 5-6 years, to operate. So the budget in Louisiana is still a mess, and it's still a problem, and it's still causing havoc with some of our more important basic services like education and healthcare.
Is the 150 million, is that from the revenue estimating conference, do you know, or is that?
Oh yeah, it would probably be. I just saw I saw it on it was, and then today in the Advocate it says he's saying $450 million in revenue, but Ilario was the first one to say it. That the deficit is now $450 million.
Okay, but the only way to officially know in terms of that is sanctioned by the state is the revenue estimating conference. Am I correct?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Valerio said that the deficit was now down. The projected deficit was only $450 million, and I didn't get a chance to read.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm in the dock on that also, but we'll have to check and see. So let's assume that. Well, regardless, I mean, that is a number that's being floated around right now. Ilario, where Ilario goes, I think the legislature goes.
Man, well, no, you've got the House, which is a different world, which is controlled by the Republicans. If you send back a budget to them that is totally, they're totally opposed to, then you could have a meltdown, and you could have a session in without a budget. So you can't send a budget back to them that they're totally going to would be unacceptable. So there has to be, and I think you'll see them try to do a better job. Look, one of the things you're seeing, Stephen, is they've got this budget pretty much where they want it as of today. Now Valerio's challenge is, and I think that's what he said, was the challenge is we've got to go over to the House and start negotiating and get this done. They don't want all the last minute changes they had where some of the consequences were sales tax on automobiles, taxes on sales tax. So there were a lot of sales tax on football tickets to high
Sure,
school
sure.
games.
But
All
you know,
of those things
yeah.
so they're trying to fix that.
Well, and the reason why I said, what I said about, where the area goes,
Right.
the thing is that, the House the House is controlled by, Republicans, fiscal hawks, and they want to cut primarily. They want to cut the Senate because Olario basically has had really good relationships with the governors, Jindal in the past, Edwards in the past, different Edwards now. He has been able to sway the Senate. So you need both houses to come to an agreement, like happened early this spring.
Yeah, and as of today, they're trying to avoid another disaster.
And we almost had that disaster a couple months ago, and like you said, it was down to the last second. And we wanted to avoid that. But so the business community lobby, for an example, they don't want a special session.
No, they're trying to avoid a special session because the temptation, or they're if you look at a survey, but this one, I think the public's paying a little more attention. But there is a propensity for the legislature to go get money from business rather than their individual voters back home. They can risk having the business community mad at them versus going back home with raising sales tax to the highest in the country, as one of the questions came up with. And for example, raising sales tax, 80+% of Republican voters in Louisiana said they wouldn't necessarily vote to reelect their Republican legislator because they raised that sales tax. So what will these legislators, what's their propensity? It's to go tax somebody other than the people back home. So business knows that they're in danger in a special session, because if they don't raise income tax, or if they don't raise a penny exemption or whatever else is available, then the chances are it'll shift back to getting the rest of it from the business community.
So the business community basically is saying, look, we don't know we don't know what's going to happen in terms of revenues. Right. They're arguing that revenues are actually going to improve, and so therefore, come September, we may be in a situation where we don't need any taxes at all. Okay, that's my general impression in terms of what Stephen Weigerspack is saying. What he has said in the past. But the healthcare community, the hospitals, education, higher ed, they're saying, hey, look, we need certainty now.
Yeah,
so and am I correct?
Yeah, and they should say that they're at risk because of the lack of revenue. Means they can't handle the patients they need to treat. The higher ed can't fund the amount of professors they think they need to teach, all of the money it takes to run a university and run a hospital. And then on the other side of the street are the people who pay the bill. So we've just had this gridlock for years and years. So this isn't new to Louisiana.
Sure.
But what is occurring is that this constant gridlock, fighting, accusations, who's going to pay the taxes, has really turned off the public, to even a greater extent. And no matter what anyone says, and one of the beneficiaries is most people, and look, I've talked about it, you've talked about it, everybody's talked about, there are certain areas of the government that need money. But you can't convince the voters in Louisiana that yeah, they may need this money, but their position is, and it's overwhelming, by the way, that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. And that's the backdrop that makes all of this so complicated. And that's why legislators are constantly in a battle over which side of the street to stay on.
So with this poll, that indicates that Edwards' negatives are actually increasing more than his positives, although he's now at 50%.
Yeah.
There was such a big uncertain, based on the other poll,
Yeah.
there was close to 30% uncertainty.
35.
Okay.
35%, which was, remember I think you and I talked about it. You certainly could see that was a huge, it was like we wrote up the survey as the most 35% of the voters in Louisiana were taking a wait and see attitude when it came to the new governor.
And now there's only 10.
That's why the undecided was so high.
Right. And so now there's only 10% uncertainty,
right.
But his negatives increased by 4% more than his positives. Am I correct?
Yeah, and that's not, I'm not going to say that would be unusual, because he's involved in raising taxes and increasing spending, which is not something that white Democrats and Republicans are in favor of. So he's going to take a hit on it. But he did go up to 50% with his positives, and his negative is now pretty solid 40%, which I'm not going to say it's good or bad. It's certainly nothing to write home about in Louisiana. Most governors are in the high 50s. Foster and others were in the 60s and 70s because they could get both Republicans and black Democrats. But we may be past that day where we can cross party lines.
Well, and so I'm trying to get to, I know the legislature closes, this session closes Monday at 6 p.m. and then a half hour later we start the special session, and I'm just trying to think out loud with your assistance, and if they decide not to raise any revenues at all and they just decide to stay pat with a $450 million deficit, or 400, let's say they do some cuts and $350 million. Okay, now you have a special session. I mean, am I correct?
You mean if they don't raise any money?
Yeah, I mean, there's a constitutional mandate.
No, what happens is this budget. Here's where they are, and that's why there's so much pressure right now, Stephen, for till the 6th. Whatever this budget is, it's based on being able to come up with additional cash to not make cuts. If they don't have the money, the $450 million or whatever it is, that's it. That budget has to be readjusted.
Sure.
And if it's $450 million short, he's got to cut $450 million out of it, if that's the real number.
Right, and so that's what I'm saying. Assuming that after your poll, and it indicates that, number one, Treasurer John Kennedy's been saying, okay, we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. The poll indicates that Republican legislators, you better watch out, don't raise any even Democrat legislators, you better watch out, don't raise taxes. And so if the legislators say, take your poll, hear that, and they say, okay, fine, we're going to go into the special session, and we're not going to and we're not going to raise taxes this session. And I mean, I'm sorry, we're not going to
we're not going to raise taxes in the special session.
We're just going to cut. We're not going to cut enough. So that means that basically we're not going to find any other cuts. We're not going to find any other tax exemptions or anything. That's really what I'm referring to.
Right.
Okay. So we're just going to go in there. We're now $450 million short governor, that's what we have, and that's all you can, and that's what we're going to spend. So the governor comes up with a special session starting a half hour after the general session, and what happens is the issue is how do we raise money, and the legislature is saying, we're not going to do it.
Right. Yeah, and if they don't, then look, there are several. It's not the end of the world. First of all, since it's gone from, I guess it's about to drop. We've gone from 800 million to now 450 million. The original projection was $1.8 billion, or I don't know what it was, a huge number.
Yeah, roughly, sure. Yeah.
So, but most capital observers are of the opinion, and that's where the legislature is, and that's why the legislature is so confident that they're not that worried about not voting for additional revenue. They're of the opinion that, number one, if they don't vote for this and they stand pat, the governor can squeeze it out of the budget. But number two, they're betting, and I'm pretty sure they're probably betting correctly, that there is not a $450 million deficit in reality. There'll be much less. In fact, by next March, April, May, the discussion of deficits will be like a thing of the past, because the economy is coming back, and yet we have cut so much out of the budget that when we do get back to the level that we normally would be, then we won't be in the red anymore. And there's a pretty good chance that'll happen. And we're only $450 million, and that is not a lot of money.
Well, that's not a lot of money considering where we have been. Right. Yeah. I mean, we were close to $3 billion, and if you add, in addition, if you look at from the last year, we're close to, that's $4 billion. The 1.4 billion. So, I mean, that's a pretty substantial hole that we've been in, and so now we're beginning to come out. But if I'm a hospital and I'm a university, I'm saying, wait, no, you can't do this. I mean, there's no guarantee.
Well, they're also going to allow universities the freedom to be able to raise tuition. They're also allowing hospitals the opportunity to go get federal money based on fees they're going to charge themselves, and be able to get 2 and 3 to 1 matching money. So the end of the world is, it isn't really, we're not talking about what it was 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sure it's not what they want. I'm sure it's not what they need. But because of this crunch, maybe the good thing as far as universities are concerned is that we are allowing them more flexibility. Instead of having to get the legislature to approve every penny, they're slowly but surely establishing a new system where they can go raise money for their individual institutions of what the public will pay. So, and then your hospitals are going to have the Medicaid expansion, plus they can raise more federal dollars. Of course, there's a story in the paper today that the cost to the average, which is a front page story, huge story about the premiums for everyone else is going to go skyrocket in Louisiana for Obamacare. So I didn't quite get a chance to read all of it, but there are a lot of changes, and you could, I guess it's exciting for you and I and what we do. Louisiana is not stagnant; it's changing dramatically. What we've been through, maybe we've shaken out a lot of stuff. I think one of the opportunities that this governor or the legislature has, Stephen, is that we really need to reform spending. We can't keep going through this.
Yeah, but that's long term. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is this. I'm just trying to see if I'm the government, if I'm the governor and the legislature, okay, and I know that by July 1, okay, I've got to have the number in place. Okay, for that's when the fiscal year starts.
The fiscal year starts, but Stephen, all during the year, you can make adjustments to the budget.
Sure. Both
As
up,
money
up
comes
and down.
in, as
Sure.
new money comes in or additional money, you plug it in, and you avoid and so
But if I'm a university, I mean,
no, I'm not sitting here saying that they're comfortable. I'm
sure.
saying that at this point in time, I think one of the things that's hurting is, number one, it's almost within every 10 days there's a new number, and it's always going down. It's which is working that's definitely working towards the benefit of the people who don't want to raise any more taxes, because the government can't every time they give us a number of what the deficit is, it's constantly changing. So, but I'm not disagreeing. The bottom line is we need money. We don't know how much it is. The special session will be another attempt to raise money, but there is not quite the problems universities have had. I think we do need reforms. But they also can raise money now.
But they have to make a decision, and that's what I'm getting at. They've got to make a decision. I mean, there are a lot of long-term solutions, but especially if you don't have say, oil price issue. But you've got to make decisions in terms of what the tuition is going to be for this upcoming year. Okay, hospitals have got to know if they're going to have enough money, or otherwise get it out of the contracts that they have.
Yeah, well, that's a limited group, though. Those are the rest of the hospitals pretty much know. Those are contract where those people took over the population of charity in those communities, and that's a limited. What's that? Seven, I think, 7 contracts.
Yeah, but those are the public hospitals.
Yeah, but look, those are public hospitals, and that would be my priority. They're arguing about how much they want to pay them. They're saying some of the contracts were too lucrative. They're saying, so I don't know if it's not about, right now, I don't know if it's not about not having enough money is agreement on what's it really worth to the state to pay them. Remember, you're paying private hospitals to take over that population base, and the argument seems to be, are we getting our money's worth, or are we paying too much?
So if we don't have a contract, then we revert back to the old system, the public, which is instead of private public partnership.
I don't think we can. It's gone. We don't have that. We don't have a charity hospital system.
Which is what the point I'm making is that if I guess what I'm saying is if I'm Mr. Government, don't I need to dot my I's, cross my T's, so that hospitals and educators know what's going to happen for September, rather than roll the dice? I'm not arguing for taxes. I'm just trying to figure out, how do we deal with this situation if there is this uncertainty, and then of course the issue of TOPS, as you mentioned, there is the question as to whether or not we fully fund TOPS, whether or not we prorate it.
Well, I didn't even put TOPS in.
Yeah, in your poll.
If I'd have put TOPS in there, it would be as any legislature you've talked to right now. It's so popular, and there's so much threats back home about if that money's not available next year, and my kid has been planning on that, or what, that's when you're going to see some blood in the streets related to the legislature and even the governor's popularity. So that's the only thing out there that they think has enough public attention to persuade to get legislators to vote for additional revenue. Look, what you're saying is correct, but I'm going to remind you of something, and it goes to what you're saying. What you're saying is absolutely correct. The only thing out there right now that's important enough to the public, the taxpayers,
Right.
that they're really concerned about is TOPS. So you could say that we're turned upside down, but that is the only thing out there that that the governor has,
Sure.
and the legislature has to convince people we need more money to save TOPS. The argument is we need more money to save higher ed and to save hospitals isn't a winning argument at this point in time. What trumps it is, well, wait, we have plenty of money, we're just spending it improperly. So that's not working. So your point is very well taken, and I'm going to expand on it. What you're saying is exactly right. But what's tragic about it, or what the problem is, and that's why I go back to some type of reform where we can get people to believe in state government. The only thing that is available to avoid what you just discussed, which is absolutely and unequivocally true, in any and all respects related to anticipation or lack of being able to plan, there's only one thing out there right now that's able to, that they hope will be able to attract enough votes to get additional money into state government is TOPS. It is not those individual particular areas by themselves. So it is put them in a precarious position, and now we're down to TOPS as being the only thing out there to bring in additional revenue, and that's basically where we are.
So let me just ask this theoretical question, if I might, and that is, let's assume that the legislature, and again, it's controlled by Republicans, okay? It has been controlled by Republicans, for the last, say, 5 years in terms of both houses being controlled by Republicans. So if they decide that they're going to hold pat and they're not going to, raise revenues. Well, number one, they're not going to go after the tax exemptions that are there and raise revenues that way during this particular regular session, because you can raise taxes. Right. Okay, so we're, let's say, 450 in a hole, and the special session now starts, and the legislature decides, hey, no, we don't have enough interest. We're not going to raise taxes. We'll raise a little bit of money here in terms of exemptions, and let's say we get down to, because revenues increase, we get down to, say, 300 million or so. So now the special session ends. We're in a hole 300 million. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Republican legislature has virtually total control over what happens, whether for good or bad. What control now does the governor have?
Well, he has control over what's prioritizing spending. You would have to cut more government. You would have to hope that you get revenues in. You could delay funding things in the hopes of governors have a lot of leeway and a lot of authority. At the end of the year, if you have a $300 million deficit, like we did in February, we didn't have any choice. We were coming to the end, which is in a few weeks. So we had to go raise all that. We had to raise money in a tax session, and then we started trying to raise money for the next budget year. But we're not really to the point where back in January, February, we'll have to start having a huge tax increase to have enough money. The question is, are we at the end of the cycle? And I don't know. Are we going to continue to have these budget deficits, Steve? I don't know. See, we've had those for 7 years. Jindal had an embarrassment of riches for 1 year, about 900 plus million. He spent it, and then from then on, it was just downhill.
Sure, but the point I'm making, though, if I can cut you off, and that is that, okay, so leading into the special session in early this year, the Republican Party said The governor wants to raise taxes. The Democrats want to raise taxes. Don't do it. Well, the legislature didn't hear, they didn't listen or whatever. They raised, the Republican-controlled legislature, along with the governor and the Democrats in the legislature, they raise taxes. They raise a lot of taxes.
They raise a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. They raise a lot of money through taxes.
Right.
Okay, now, however, the Republican Party blamed only the Democrats, not their fellow Republicans. They only blamed the Democrats and the governor. They continue to do that, okay, as we proceed through this particular session. And now we're going into the special session. And they're saying only the governor and only the Democrats are going to raise taxes. Your poll comes out saying, Republicans, if you raise taxes, you're going to, your job's on the line. So now we're getting into special session, and let's say, we're at a point, do we raise money through taxes or not? And what control does the governor have? Everything basic, at the end, the governor has control because he can go and allocate. But in actuality, if they raise taxes, it's going to be Republicans and Democrats and the governor raise taxes.
Yes.
I mean, am I correct?
Look,
and if they don't raise taxes,
look, they're going to be legislators. And you can, Republican Party or not, that's their job. They're supposed to be blaming Democrats for everything. When the sun doesn't come up, it's the Democrats' fault, or it comes up.
And it works the other way too.
Yeah, but if you're looking at the survey I did, and you've raised all this money, and you're a Republican, and somebody says based on Republican such and such, we now have the highest sales tax in the nation. I do those campaigns, and it's going to cost that legislation.
Sure.
They're going to have to spend a lot of money to defend that vote, to defend whatever else is going on. And at the time, it's very risky. And Democrats, the same thing. That's the way the game's played. But to get past the politics of it, that's just politics. The Republicans and the Democrats, I think, worked remarkably well during the first special session. They came up with a lot of money. I don't know. Most people didn't think they would come up with that much, and I think the bite at the apple was their best shot. It failed because of the way the session ended. They left some money on the table, and the question is, Republicans right now, as far as I'm concerned, are not interested in going back to the table and putting up more money, and the only thing left to find out is, can the governor convince them? But they have a decent working relationship to come up with as much money as they did. Unfortunately, the amount of money they didn't raise, or they couldn't come up with at that point in time, Stephen, was a lot more. What if we had raised another $1 billion? And then as of today, think about this, Stephen. We only need $450 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have raised $550 million that they don't need. So,
and that's certainly the argument that lobby.
That's the Republican here.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've been there and did that.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're the administrator, okay, if you're the administration, basically you've got to make sure those trains run on time. You got to make sure the students know what they're going to be paying, okay, for their tuition, whether or not the hospitals are going to be open, so it's a different, it's a totally different mindset in whether the governor is Republican or Democrat. That person is a point person. That person is the guy who's going to get the blame.
Well, let me bring you back to where I saw a lot of stories about it, and you've done a good job of it. But if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, and both of them feel this way, by the way, it's like walking around the legislature. they're not buying that the universities are broke. We have too many. No, they won't reform themselves. The Board of Regents is absolutely one of the most unpopular group organizations in the state.
Sure. But that's so long term, though. You see, that's my point. I'm talking about.
We've been saying this, and I've been saying it for 15 years. And all governors who've been there, including Foster, including Romer, I think most of them have attempted to nibble at the edges, but we just don't ever seem. So yeah, it's expensive, but we're also giving them something they've always wanted, which is now we'll find out if the public wants to pay what they think they're worth. And you and I shouldn't have to pay as much as we pay on each student, by the way. The students, according to universities, the students in Louisiana don't pay as much as students in other states. The taxpayer puts a big percentage of the bill, by the way.
Sure, but what I'm talking about though is how do we deal with this issue come September? Okay, wow. And that's really what my focus is. Because the universities, whether it's
I got a solution.
They've got to make a decision in terms of what courses are available and how much is the tuition and whether TOPS is going to be around, and the hospital is going to have to make a decision as to whether they're open or closed. And those are real decisions. The legislature can go home, okay. The governor is in the middle of this and has got to administer this, and that's the only point I'm making. I'm not advocating taxes.
Yeah, I know you're not, and I agree with where you are. But I'm saying at the present time, based on the taxpayers, based on the numbers you're looking at in the surveys, I'm saying you better give the universities more flexibility. You better tell them starting ASAP that you can raise tuition to cover these, and that's what they're having to do.
And the hospitals.
The hospital, it's not all of the hospitals. It's 7 hospitals. They are giving the hospitals the flexibility with the 200,000 new patients. By the way, the feds are going to pay for it.
Sure.
And by the way, the hospitals had that little, which I helped them with, they had that little amendment last year, which the voters approved, to allow them to collect money from themselves, turn it into the state, and the state can go get more Medicaid money. And by the way, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, okay. So let's change gears for a second because I know both of us need to go, and that is the U.S. Senate race. As this point in time, John Kennedy, the treasurer, leads by over 20 points over congressmen, and why don't you just give us...
My thoughts would be, the word would be caution. Why? Because at this time last year, Vitter, in a survey Southern Media did, jumped to 39 because of Common Core, and he was at the forefront of it. John Kennedy is obviously benefiting from the budget debate and whether we have a spending problem or a revenue problem. He is all over radio and TV. He's taking advantage of it. How long will this fight last? The Common Core was good for Vitter, but it didn't last through the election. And so my point is that caution, being 31 or 32% right now is well and good, but you've got a long time to go. None of these people have spent a nickel. You've got 2 congressmen who are heavyweights. Mm-hmm. You've got 2 Democrats whose numbers are vastly understated because of the Democrats don't know them, blacks don't know them. 40% of the Democrats hadn't made a decision. So the picture in this poll is distorted towards someone who is really well known.
Sure. At this point in time,
Right.
in the election,
Right.
sure. Although Kennedy took advantage of it with his email asking for money, saying, "Hey, look how well we're doing," and look, I mean, that's the thing to do,
Yeah.
for sure.
Right.
One last question. That is, I'm looking at a scenario. Okay, John Kennedy has been the as you said, the point man saying, "Hey, we have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem." Legislature hasn't found any money. Okay, I mean, they haven't.
Right.
The Republican-controlled legislature hasn't found any money. If we go and we don't raise any taxes come September, October, and if things are a mess in terms of not knowing, in terms of the universities, TOPS, in terms of the hospitals, and you have a meltdown because you don't have the money, is he going to get the blame?
Well, that's a good, that's my point about caution. He's very well known, much better known than anyone else. He's benefiting from this gigantic fight we're having.
Sure.
The legislature and the governor and state governments, hospitals, everybody's involved in this fight. But the one of the things that's benefiting him right now is, when you say that there's no money, what I think helps him is that every time they announce that, wait, we have the deficit is shrinking, John Kennedy looks like a genius, because he keeps saying, this is not the case. More revenue is going to be available. The price of the price of gasoline, oil is going up. The tax credits, a lot of those tax credits have been used up. Kennedy is hedging his bet by not saying we're broke. He's saying that we're asking for a lot of money when we know they're not telling us that a lot of money is on its way to Louisiana, and the deficit's not as big as they say it is. You're correct. That's a one-trick pony, and if something happens and that's not the big issue, then then he doesn't have that quite that.
Right.
I don't know if it would. I'm not going to say that it would blow up, but is it? What your point is it enough to get him over the finish line? It could hurt him, but I think the bigger question is that issue going to stay strong enough for him to dominate the Senate election? And that's the big if.
That's absolutely. Okay, well, look, I think we really covered the waterfront. Boy, the legislature and the governor would be playing some heavy games of chicken this last week of the session. I mean, for sure.
This is, we call crunch time. There's big time politics being played. There's going to be winners and losers. You've got Alario in the House. You've got a new speaker. They've got to come together and find some kind of compromise.
And not at the last minute too.
Right.
Last second.
Yeah.
The last second, for sure. Absolutely.
But thanks, Steve. We'll do this again. Maybe we'll get together as this dies down. I think these numbers you put up today on the presidential is really interesting, and I think there's good. Actually, I'll say this: there's good news in there for one person.
Okay.
Donald Trump, Hillary. I think it's great news for John Bel Edwards, because I don't expect Hillary, not just this poll, but any poll, I don't think she'll be spending a lot of her jet fuel coming to Louisiana. I think it's better for him that she's not here.
Right.
She's so unpopular. So he may get a big break of not having to bring her around the state and drag his.
Well, I got to tell you, I see a real Trump meltdown. I really, not in Louisiana, but I'm looking at some of the things that have happened in the last couple of days. Where he just continues to try to beat people up and not look presidential.
Well, if he maintains this style of campaign for another 5 or 6 months and it doesn't melt down, I'm with you. I will be totally shocked. I just don't see how you can keep this relentless attack on your opponents and not eventually drag you down.
But it's a person, he was blasting Hillary Clinton for the way she talks. I mean, that's great, but that's not the issue of the day. I mean, and people, I was tired of it, many months ago.
Well,
that's, to me, that's sandbox.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have a presidential unlike any we've ever had,
Sure.
where most of the attention and most of the rhetoric will be on personal attacks of each other and
Sure.
family.
Yeah.
And that, yeah. So I think, look, maybe this will be the end of it, but maybe we saw it here in Louisiana with the Republicans electing John Bel Edwards. We could see Trump he could be the bitter of national politics by the personal attacks and all of that stuff blowing up. So, yeah, it's very possible. And so I'm not going to disagree with you. I saw a lot of that here, similar approach here last year that didn't work out well.
Right. It's been really interesting, exciting. Okay, listen, thank you, Bernie. I appreciate it. And